Hi, welcome to Radio 4's Consumer Programme. Today, it's a year since new rules forced banks to refund people who are victims of a very common type of fraud. We'll find out how that's been working. There's meant to be a shortage of university accommodation, but some rooms are lying empty. Are students being priced out?
I get the maximum student finance, and even then I'm only left like a few £100s after rent.
And is the private chef in your home replacing eating out?
Everything okay with your food? It's gone very quiet.
Have you ever used a private chef? Email us about that, please. You and yours at bbc.co.uk, or you can send a text to 84844. But first, a scam that is really active at the minute is targeting people using the travel booking platform booking.com. Listeners have been in touch to tell us what's been happening to them. It starts with a message, apparently from the people you booked your accommodation with. They ask for payment up front. They know all the details of your booking, and their message comes via the booking.com website. So what chance do you have of spotting that one's a scam? Well, here are just two of the listeners who've been in touch with us about it. Steve Alderson from Newbury and Brendan Burgess from Dublin. Hi both and welcome both. We often say on this programme there's no such thing as a typical scam victim. You know that anyone can be done over if they just get you at the right time. And almost to make the point, Steve, you're an IT expert and Brendan, you're a consumer journalist.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So Brendan, if I start with you, tell us what happened.
So back in December last, I made a booking for a hotel in Vienna to go in June for a few days, and it came to €914. And after making the booking through booking.com, I got an email from the Hotel Herzegovina, and it said, can we arrange a taxi for you? And I declined that, and then they sent another email about the various things that were happening in Vienna at the time, and again, I just ignored that. And then in January, they sent an email, and they said, we are writing to inform you that your booking is in danger of cancellation due to the system marking it as suspicious. And they said, to prove that your booking is genuine, pay for it now and we'll refund the money to you. So it had come from the hotel via booking.com. So my guard was completely down. It never occurred to me that this could be anything other than a genuine email. So I clicked on the link. I paid the €914, and it said, please wait while we confirm this with your bank. And then it sort of whirred around a little bit. And then it came back and said, this is all in a little chat box on the side. That didn't go through. Try again. So I put the information in again. And then I said, oh, hold on a sec. This just doesn't sound right. Now, it took me a long time to get to that stage. This doesn't sound right. So I had a look at my bank account, and the money had already been taken.
Wow.
And they were trying to have a second to go with me.
Gosh.
So I then immediately rang my bank, and they said, well, no, I'd authorised the payment. And that was it. It was gone. They couldn't call it back. I rang the hotel. The guy in the hotel couldn't speak English, but I tried to tell him what happened, and he just said, scam, scam, scam. So I sort of said, sugar. The payment went via a payment company, which I'd never heard of before, called World Remit. But I assumed that was like Stripe or PayPal. I tried to contact them, but to contact them, you'd have to open an account. And I think I called them, but it said, you will be waiting 1 hour to get through, which is, of course, way too long anyway to do anything about it.
Brendan, I know you did eventually get this money back. Tell me how.
Yeah, well, I complained to the hotel and to booking.com, and I got nowhere with booking.com. They kept sending me the same questions and looking for the same information, although I sent it to them. And they said, go to your bank and try and get the money back from your bank. And if they refuse, then we'll deal with it. So I made a chargeback request to my bank, and a month later, the money arrived back in my bank account.
So at least that was something. Steve, tell us what happened to you.
Well, in my situation, we were booking several places to stay in Portugal, and the property in question was the last one on the list. By that time, we'd done a lot of searching and a lot of checking, and I guess we thought we'd found everything we needed. So we were keen to just get everything in order and everything done. The particular property in question, as soon as we booked it, just a few hours later, came through with a message through the booking.com system saying, great, thanks very much for your booking. Just to make sure that you get this confirmed, we need to take a payment. And although I'm slightly embarrassed about this now, we thought, right, okay, let's just get this done. We just want, everything sorted and in order. So I went back. I think they did say on there that, let's go over to WhatsApp.
I see. So they pulled you off the site to make the payment in your case.
Yeah, that's right. So we went over to WhatsApp, and the next instruction was, some bank details, send some money here. And I say we, but it was me. I got on and we made the payment. I forget now exactly how long later, but it wasn't long. It might have been the next day or so. We simply received a message through the booking.com platform to say that the booking was cancelled. And then, of course, you get that somewhat sick feeling in the pit of your stomach and think, hang on, this just doesn't feel right at all. I immediately got on the phone to booking.com. In my case, it was a substantial amount of money. It was actually over €1,800.
Was this for the rental of a villa then, Steve?
Yes, for 6 days in the south of Portugal. By the way, I should mention that on the website, this, I'm going from memory here, but this was somebody who was mentioned as a super host.
Yeah, sure.
They had other properties on the website. I'm pretty sure from memory there were other reviews on there. We were quite careful about looking through. So, as far as we were concerned, everything looked pretty straightforward.
We got in touch with Booking.com about you, and they told us that in the rare event a customer is targeted by a scammer and loses money, they should go first to their bank. And if they can't get a refund that way, Booking.com will help with a refund once they have the necessary documentation. Oh, we just heard Brendan did get the money back from his bank. But Steve, Booking.com says you haven't yet sent them the necessary documentation.
Well, that's correct, but I've subsequently called Booking.com on 2 occasions, and on both occasions, when I went through their automatic voice recording system and got to a human being, as soon as they took the booking reference number for the accommodation, the line was cut. Now, if they'd actually spoken to me, they might have been able to say that they were awaiting some further information.
So you've never had your money back? I mean, you're considered.
No. I did report it to my bank. I reported it to the fraud line and so on, as much for information purposes as anything else. But my specific issue with Booking.com is the way that they've just gone, deaf and dumb on this particular subject. And from the information I found elsewhere online and heard in other reports, this is just a common tactic of theirs. They stick their heads firmly in the sand and deny any sort of role or future role in sorting these problems out. And the thing that particularly galls me about my experience, and it sounds not dissimilar to others, is that these messages that we receive come through the Booking.com.
Yes, it makes it incredibly hard, doesn't it, to spot that it's a scam. Now, what they say about that Booking.com is that if you're asked to pay up front, check the payment details on your booking confirmation. If there's any doubt, contact their customer service team. I realise not as easy as it sounds maybe. Or click on report an issue, which they say is included in the chat function. Now, they also say they would never ask you to give your card details via email, chat message, text message or phone. So let me bring in someone who has investigated this, who can enlighten us here on what is going on. Rafe Pilling has looked into this fraud as part of his work for Sophos, and Sophos is a global provider of cybersecurity services. Rafe, tell us how you came to investigate this very fraud.
Yeah, hello, thank you for
you're welcome.
So it's funnily enough about 2 years to the month since we first started looking at this, and we tend to work with the sort of enterprise end of the market, and so our entry point for this was really helping a hotel who had been scammed themselves, and this is kind of where it starts. The hotel is initially the victim of a phishing attack, so a malicious email that is sent. In this case, it's multiple emails as they build up a degree of trust with the hotel first, usually under some pretext of having lost a passport or looking to make to check about dietary requirements, some sort of pretext that is relevant to the hotel, and then they will deliver malware that will either steal credentials from the hotel's booking system and allow them then to access the hotel's Booking.com account and essentially become the hotel. And at that point, they can reach out to the hotel's customers and start sending the messages that we've just been hearing about from Steve and Brendan. And as you say, it's on the Booking.com platform. It's coming through the app. It's coming through the email platform. Very difficult for the guests or the individual that's made the booking to differentiate that from a scam.
So, Rafe, what's happened is that the hotel, through an email with a link in it, has downloaded, on behalf of the criminal, some software that takes from them all the details of the bookings that they have.
It's actually the credentials to get into the hotel's Booking.com account. So in the same way a guest will have a Booking.com account, the hotels have them as well. That's how they manage the guest bookings. And so those credentials and that access is then used by the criminals, the scammers, to reach out to the guests and send these fake payment requests.
What Booking.com told us about that is that phishing attacks by criminal organisations remain a significant threat to businesses across the e-commerce sector. Now, they say cybersecurity is a top priority for them, and they believe they're able to detect and block the majority of threats before they have any impact. So we should be clear here, it's not Booking.com that's hacked, it's the people advertising the properties on Booking.com. We do seem to get a lot of complaints about this happening, though, through Booking.com rather than other travel platforms. Do you think it's a particular problem affecting their customers right now?
We have seen phishing attacks and credential theft attacks that target other platforms as well. I think the size and scale of Booking.com and the fact that they host a lot of hotels rather than sort of the sort of individual properties that you might see on Airbnb, where it's harder for the criminals to find the contact information of those individuals and target them. But with the hotels, they can target those hotels, they can gain access to their accounts, and then they can start defrauding the customers of those accounts.
This idea, that you could get what looks like a perfectly innocuous email, perfectly convincing, you're working in a hotel. A lot of people listening would be terrified of doing something like that. You just click on a link, and then what is it doing to your computer?
So it will usually, and the sort of insidious part of this is that usually the first email that they send is not the malicious one. They build up a rapport with the employee of the hotel that they're emailing, and it might be multiple people end up reading these messages. But eventually they get to a point where they'll deliver a link which will send malware down to the hotel's computer. So this might be malware, so a computer virus designed to steal credentials, or it could be something that lets the criminal take over that computer and operate it remotely, and so that they can access the hotel's Booking.com account and gain direct access to the hotel's customers.
So can you answer this question that I posed at the start? How on earth are you meant to spot this if these messages are sent to you within the booking platform, Booking.com, and all of your booking details are correct?
Yeah, I think it is very insidious and very difficult to spot. And the standard advice that you get from cybersecurity folks like myself about look out for suspicious links, don't click suspicious links, I think is difficult for people to follow generally. I think one of the things we can look at here, though, is something that Steve and Brenda both mentioned, that sort of sinking feeling or that sudden sort of sense of fear or urgency you get when you receive an email that says there's something wrong with your booking, it's going to get cancelled, or you're going to lose it because of some payment-related issue. I think that should be a trigger for people, that sort of sudden sense of urgency, that sudden sense of panic, as a sign that maybe something is wrong here. And you should get in contact with either booking.com directly through customer services or the hotel directly and ask them if there is a payment issue and how can that be resolved. But yeah, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, I think, is a good indicator.
Could I just ask you before we leave it briefly, if you would, Brendan and Steve, what you feel, I don't know, if anything you've learned from this, Steve?
I won't be making any more direct payments on booking.com. That's number one. I still feel that they should do better. Because you've described a particular issue there with a supplier systems being compromised. But as customers, we should be expecting, I think, some better form of protections from effectively the supermarket that is booking.com. What they're doing is washing their hands of it. They're just saying...
Well, not quite. They are saying that they will compensate if you have the right documentation. Could I just ask Brendan before, and then we must leave it? Brendan, what do you think? What have you learned?
Well, I would have thought that I would never fall for a scam. And so I've learned that, yeah, I can fall for a scam. And the other thing is, if something is in any way unusual, even if it's coming from a source that you trust, the hotel and booking.com, pick up the phone. And, we do everything online these days. If something is a little bit unusual, pick up the phone. If I had phoned the hotel and said, what is your problem with my booking? They would have said, scam, scam.
Like they did, but only too late.
Exactly.
Brendan Burgess, Steve Alderson, Rafe Pilling from Sophos. Thank you all for that. Thank you. The new security checks for travellers to the EU began yesterday. They're being introduced gradually over the next 6 months. Now, the plan is that the first time anyone aged 12 or over travels into the EU from outside the bloc, they'll need to register at a special kiosk that has biometric scanners built into it. In the kiosk, they'll scan their passport, then the machine will take their fingerprints and a photo. They'll also answer 4 short questions about their trip. Once registered, these details will be stored for 3 years, and on future trips within that time, all the travellers will need is a quick face scan to confirm identity. Even so, you can imagine, can't you, the potential for delays and disruption? We were talking about that on You and Yours on Wednesday with Simon Calder, the Independent's travel correspondent, and he promised then to update us on how he got on travelling over the weekend. He sent us this from Prague Airport yesterday.
In the land of Franz Kafka, here's what you get greeted with at Prague Airport. You will see these tall machines. The idea is that you select your language. Next, you have to place your passport data page facing down in the left-hand slot. And this bit is really fiddly because you can't actually see what you're doing, unlike e-gates, where the scanner where you put your passport is visible. If you get it right, your passport photo is then going to pop up on screen. You, of course, will be looking glum, not smiling, not your best self at all, but your name, your surname, your date of birth appear, and it asks, is this you? Probably it's best to say yes. Now the biometrics begin. Time to capture your face image. Strict instructions, no masks, no head coverings, no sunglasses, but regular spectacles are okay. It doesn't actually say no smiling, but I find that's wise in these situations. Just look into the camera. It's the next biometric bit that's tricky, fingerprint scanning. The green light flashes to show where you have to put the 4 fingers of your right hand, and it takes a while to decide if it's happy. If you pass that test, then it's your left hand. You're then on to the questions about your purpose and means. You could choose from business, tourism, official meetings, medical treatment, even spa stays. I selected private tourism. Then, do I have confirmation of accommodation? Do I have a return ticket? Means of payment. Do you have €66 in cash per day or a credit or debit card? Do you have travel insurance? I do, but I suspect some people will say yes even if they don't. And then there's a bit of toing and froing, doubtless with some database somewhere buried in a nuclear bunker somewhere in the EU. And finally it says, thank you for your time, you're all set. Please go to a border control counter to perform the manual border check. Yes, this is a system that is an extra layer of red tape. Kafka would love it.
That's Simon Calder trying out the new EU entry system. It's being introduced to improve border security and to help police the rule that non-EU citizens can spend no longer than 90 days in any 180-day period there. So we'll keep in touch with how it goes on from here, and please email us with your experience of it. You and yours at bbc.co.uk. On our phone in last Tuesday, we were talking about the housing market, what it's like trying to buy and sell a home right now, and a lot of callers had problems with conveyancing, the legal process of transferring the ownership of a property. We thought we'd look into it, and we asked the legal ombudsman if they were seeing more complaints, and it turns out they are. Almost 1 in 3 complaints now are about conveyancers, and that has been rising over the last 10 years. We'll hear from one group that represents the conveyancers in a moment, but first, we can hear from the senior ombudsman, Claire Daniel. Hi, Claire, and thanks so much for coming on. So when we got in touch with you, you told us that there has been a rise both in the number and in the proportion of complaints that you get now that are about conveyancing, and that has been a steady rise since 2012, to the point where these complaints now make up a third of all the complaints you have. Tell us, what are the most common reasons for people being unhappy with the service they've had?
Hi, Winifred, it's lovely to meet you. The most common reasons are primarily communication and delay, shortly followed by the quality of the advice provided during the transaction.
So it's communication and delay. And if we just think of sheer numbers, by the time a complaint gets to you, people have already failed to resolve it, haven't they, with the conveyancer? How many a year are getting to you? Hundreds?
So about 30% of our complaints in 24-25 were about conveyancing, and that's from a total number of complaints in their thousands.
So it's many thousands of complaints. What do you think's driving it? Why are more and more people unhappy with the quality of conveyancing?
There are a really broad range of reasons. It isn't just one single thing. Obviously, there have been significant changes to the conveyancing market itself. There are more obligations on conveyancers. There's also a change in the expectations of customers in terms of the style and methods of communication that they might receive.
So you mean they're expecting a phone call and maybe they're lucky to get an email?
Yes, absolutely. Different types of conveyancers often offer a wide range of different methods of communication. Some of them only communicate mainly through portals, through the internet, whereas obviously other firms might do it more by phone. And it really very much depends on the nature of the service that you've purchased with your conveyance, what that level of communication looks like for you.
Well, let me bring in Stephen Ward. He's the Deputy Chief Executive at the Council for Licensed Conveyancers. Could you, Stephen, if you would, just run us through then some of these changes that have been mentioned that have made this work more complicated, more onerous for people who do it?
Well, I think first off, and thanks for having me on, first off, I should say that people shouldn't be afraid to enter the home buying or selling process. Something like in excess of 1 million transactions each year means that even the numbers that Dan was talking about aren't excessive. We're never complacent about complaints against those we regulate and that, but the numbers of complaints about firms that we regulate is actually going down in recent years. So I think that's positive. But there are different expectations and different requirements on conveyancers than there were in the past. Anti-money laundering legislation, for example, means that the source of funds and source of wealth of people buying homes has to be checked. That's to stop bad actors being able to bring money into the country to use for nefarious purposes. And that can be complicated if you're relying on the bank of mum and dad or other friends and relatives to help you out with your purchase. So that adds onto it. We're better at and tighter on ID checking and so on. There's also the getting the information you need out of who's selling the house. And that's one reason the reforms that we'll probably talk about in a bit are so important in making data more accessible.
Well, we talked about those on the phone in last week, and basically the government at Westminster is proposing a system where the seller would get most of the information together before a house goes on the market or a flat goes on the market, and that will speed things up. But after last week's phone-in, we were contacted by a conveyancer in Hertfordshire called Annabelle. Now, she didn't want to come on the programme today, but she did send us an email about the changes to conveyancing that she has seen in her professional life, and she says these changes have made her decide to leave the profession. Now, she puts it down not to the things that you have mentioned, but to the growth of what she calls factory farms for conveyancing. So here's just a bit of what she said.
The main problem is that large conveyancing companies operate the system as factory conveyancers. The clients are not individuals, they are just another matter to deal with, but there is no thought of personal attention, and the fact that the whole process involves actual people is ignored. Their staff are underqualified or inexperienced, and when they work from home, there is no one to train, monitor or assist, and people don't learn. The factory conveyancers ask ridiculous questions that are bountiful, but irrelevant, but we have to answer them.
So, Stephen Ward, these conveyancing factories, as described, they may be keeping the costs right down, but are some of them charging too little really to provide you with a decent service?
Well, there are horses for courses, and we would also always say that somebody who's buying or selling a house and looking for a conveyancer should shop around, find the right conveyancer for them, perhaps a firm that has experience with the type of property you're selling.
But we don't do that, do we? We shop around for price. That's what the internet's allowed us to do. What I'm asking you is, has that facility pushed the prices down to the point where we're just not paying enough?
And I think that, consumers don't actually buy on prices as often as you imagine. They look for other things, and we put in place transparency rules for the firms we regulate so that they have to explain the nature of their service, how they provide it, and who provides it. The other thing I think to say about what are described as factory firms or volume conveyancers is that the one real measure of quality and accuracy that we have, is data from HM Land Registry on the numbers of mistakes that are made when title change applications are submitted to Land Registry at the end of the process.
But isn't that stuff? Sorry to interrupt. Isn't those catastrophic mistakes? That the wrong name is there with the registry. It's that business of waiting and waiting. No one calls you back. It's a very stressful time. It's that drives people mad.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is the only measure we have for quality that's available doesn't indicate that there's any problem arising from the scale of the firm that's being used. Now, communication is, and as has been explained, that is the most often complained about
and
issue.
delay. People just not. You feel that these people are just not getting on with it. You're in a hurry. Your sale's going to come through. Fall through. The people doing your conveyancing are not getting on with it.
And I think that's the length of transactions is a real problem now, and that's grown because of these extra requirements on firms and the amount of business that has been. With the stamp duty land tax holidays we had, that increased the volume of transactions that were in the system.
So briefly, if you would, how would you go about choosing a good conveyancer?
I would look at, start on the internet, of course, and I'd look for a conveyancer who had experience in dealing with the kind of property that I'm buying or selling. If you're buying a leasehold property, that brings with it particular concerns that you need to be aware of. So looking for a firm that's used to dealing with leasehold properties, for example, would be good. Or new builds. If you're buying a new build, look for a firm that does new build work.
Claire, Daniel, what do you think? Sorry, let me just bring Claire in. What do you think?
Absolutely. What's really important is that don't just go with the cheapest quote. Value for money is about service. It's not just about price. You don't have to go with the conveyancer that's recommended by your estate agent or your developer. What you should do is shop around and find one that offers what you need in terms of the service that you're looking for. Stephen's actually absolutely right in terms of looking for a specialist in either new build or leasehold or the specific type of property. But it's also about thinking about what level of service it is that you're looking for. So find a firm that delivers that service in a way that you're comfortable with. For example, in terms of the methods of communication. So looking for a firm with a good reputation, clear communication and transparent fees is absolutely critical.
We leave it there. Claire Daniel from the Legal Ombudsman and Stephen Ward from the Council for Licensed Conveyancers. Thanks both. For a long time, only really wealthy people could afford a private chef, but there's been a change in the market for their services. Private chefs are bringing their prices down. You can hire a chef to bring food to your home, cook and serve it for you for as little as £35 a head. It takes the price of a private chef nearer to what you'd pay in a restaurant for, say, a special occasion, and it means that more people are hiring them. Sean Nixon from Skipton in North Yorkshire is a private chef. He works right across the north of England, and he recorded this for us on Saturday as he served the Bladen family. They had a big family get-together at a holiday let near York.
So there's olive for kitchen and some dips in the middle, some olives there, just to do one like everything okay with your food? It's gone very quiet. That's not the
Well, Sean Nixon joins us now, and so does Vicky Feltham, who lives near Southampton with her partner and 2 young children. Vicky's been hiring private chefs for the last 3 years. Vicky, tell us how you got started on it, and how does a private chef vary from, say, getting some caterers in for a party?
So we got started, we were going away to a holiday let, and we all had young children and decided that we'd like to have a nice dinner together, but we didn't want to have to hire babysitters in the area that we didn't know and have all of the expense and rushing around getting taxis and things. And somebody suggested that we try bringing a chef or a caterer in, and we happened to find one online. Did it once and never looked back, really.
How is it different from a caterer?
I think caterers they come fully prepared, and there's a lot of organising to get them in and set up, and you often have to provide a lot, which we're not sure when we're going to holiday lets if we have all of that. Whereas the private chef is you have a little call, check what's in the kitchen, and they just send you a menu, you choose your options, they turn up about 5 o'clock, you go upstairs and put the kids to bed and come down. Everything's catered to your taste. So I don't particularly like spicy food, my husband does, his will have chilli in it, mine won't. And everything's just looked after with minimal organisation from you.
I take it you're not super rich, you're not in the Oprah Winfrey bracket. How much do you pay?
So we've paid sort of between £40 and £60 a head, depending on what we're eating. Usually you get a menu with different choices, and it's clear the budget might be different, but it's the materials that are changing it. So like one night we all had beef Wellington, and that was more expensive than the night that we chose chicken and fish and things on the menu.
Sean, you've been a private chef for 4 years now. What made you decide to do this?
To be honest, Winifred, exactly the same reasons as Vicky. We've got 2 small children, and we just got really frustrated when we were on holiday in holiday cottages trying to find food. We've got the added complexity of being dairy and gluten-free as a family, so trying to find somewhere to eat out in a rural area that would cater for that was very frustrating. So I just went, if only someone would come to the holiday cottage and cook a meal with proper food that we enjoyed. So yes, fully on board with your reasons there, Vicky.
So Sean, you decided you would do it yourself. You must have been a trained chef then.
No, I'm self-taught. I started cooking in my grandma's kitchen when I was at primary school, and it was went from that. I've just got a passion for food. Ever since university, people would plan into our student house for my cooked dinners. People like the food I cook. People have always said, "Oh yeah, you should go into this. You should open a restaurant." So I just thought, well, I really enjoy doing this. It's a passion. I'll just offer that as a service, and got rave reviews and haven't looked back.
So Sean, both you and Vicky talk about it as something that you would do when you were on holiday in a holiday let. Has the growth of uncatered holiday lets, has that fed into this then?
I do a mix of people's private homes, and that tends to be things like birthday parties, family gatherings, and then holiday cottages. I'm near 2 national parks, the Yorkshire Dales and the Lake District, and that's very common for people to do wedding anniversary celebrations, birthdays. But there's also quite a trend of former bed and breakfasts, maybe pubs that have closed, reopening as self-catering accommodation. So they have the kitchen facilities in that building, but obviously you can't get food there anymore. So people that stay in those places either need to get in taxis and go to the nearest town or village that has a restaurant, or get the chef out. So I kind of specialise in that rural middle of nowhere. I'll bring everything with me to a place where the nearest restaurant might be 10, 20 miles away.
Sean, have you noticed a change then in the wealth profile of the kind of people who are hiring you over time?
It does vary massively. Sometimes it's a real treat for people. They might say, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, but if we club together as a group of friends or as a family, quite often you'll get a family that will chip in to pay for it for mum and dad as a thank you. Mum's always the one that cooks in the kitchen. It'd be really nice if she had a day off for a change. And then there are people who maybe do this each year. An uncle that comes over from abroad, visits each year, the family get together, they might pay for that, or mum and dad do it as a treat. So it is quite rare for me to cook for people under 40. I'd say that's still the case. And when I do, it tends to be the parents that pay for it, so things like 21st birthdays.
You've got to have the money to do it. Yeah, even at £40 a head.
Yeah, it is still the case of mostly it's people in their 50s, 60s, to be honest. But as a group of friends, I'll do bunk houses, large house accommodation, where it's a group of people in their 30s getting together, everybody will chip in, and it actually works out cheaper than it would be to go to a restaurant because you get your own drinks in, you're not paying for that sort of service charge for the fact you're a large group. So it can work out better from a cost point of view as well as the experience.
Vicky, can you see it replacing the restaurant for lots of people, or are there some downsides?
I think it would. So it has for us. We learned about it on holiday, as I said, but we also use it socially. So we're in our 30s and we have friends that have young children. It's hard to get out and socialise. It's expensive. You all need babysitters. So we have started to use private chefs where our friends will come to us or we go to them. You set the children up for a little sleepover and then the private chef sorts dinner out and you come down and have that restaurant experience at home. And for us, it's lovely food, cheaper than if we went to a restaurant. We don't have the tip, we don't have the taxis, we don't have the babysitters, and it's not getting any cheaper to go out and have a good night, is it?
No,
So
it isn't.
I think for a group of young parents, it's a great way to replace restaurants in the comfort of your own home. Your kids are in their own bed, you're in charge if anything goes wrong, and it's cheaper.
Vicky Feltham, Sean Nixon, thank you both for that. This is You and Yours, Radio 4's Consumer Program. The time now is 19 minutes to 1. Are students in England being priced out of purpose-built student accommodation? Well, a report published today suggests that they are. A record 23% of student beds in England are priced above the maximum student maintenance loan. Some student developments are being left with empty rooms. The report from Cushman & Wakefield, a global property services company, puts the average price for a purpose-built student room with an ensuite bathroom at £282.87 a week in London and £194.47 a week outside. Our reporter Johnny Bentley spoke to some students in Manchester about their student digs.
How much are you paid a week?
130.
It's 131.
It's like £200 per week.
160.
In Bristol it was about 180 a week. In Manchester it was about 125 a week.
I was paying 159 a week for my student accommodation.
Does the maintenance loan cover the cost of the rent?
Yeah, it does, but you'd probably have to get like a job to like help on top of it.
I get the maximum student finance, and even then I'm only left like a few £100s after rent.
My maintenance loan goes to me and it doesn't cover my rent because my rent is dealt with by other sources. Parents.
You need a part-time job to get through it.
I'm commuting this year.
Or commuting in?
Yeah.
Was that because of the cost?
Yeah, my sister lives away and my parents are helping pay for just her rent because her maintenance loan doesn't even cover her rent.
Have you been to your sister's room?
I have, yeah.
What do you think?
Everything's falling apart.
We had issues with our oven breaking all the time. We actually had something wrong with our sink pipes. So it was just, why am I paying a high price for broken stuff?
The kitchen, there's nothing in the kitchen apart from the kitchen itself and the bathroom, obviously. My room's all right, though. I like it.
I'm paying £2,000 a month.
£2,000 a month?
Yeah, I've got a penthouse in it. Basically, my father, he started off from selling cars.
Right.
And then he started buying properties.
And he started giving you penthouses for £2,000?
Yeah. My dad pays it, I don't pay it.
Some students in Manchester, I should say, they are in private rented accommodation as well as purpose-built. David Feeney is from the real estate firm Cushman & Wakefield, and Emily O'Hara's 18 and in her first year at Salford University studying broadcast journalism. She is renting purpose-built accommodation. David, if I could start with you. You produce this report every year about the state of the market for this purpose-built accommodation. Now, you say that the growth in prices for these student rooms has outstripped the growth in private sector rental prices for the first time in 5 years. Why do you think that's happened?
Hi, Winifred. I think, firstly, it's probably important to say we think the market's massively structurally undersupplied with accommodation still. So there's still 2 students chasing every purpose-built bed, but certainly what we've seen this year is students are clearly seeking value for money. And I think that's why we're seeing far greater rental increases in university-provided stock than in the private sector this year. I think in the case of the most common type of accommodation, the ensuite cluster flat, where we've seen the lowest occupied beds, those developments where rents are priced perhaps 10-15% higher than comparable quality beds. So certainly this year it's not a bed at any price by any means, but if you are priced, you will fill.
So you call those cluster arrangements. That's where there is a shared kitchen and living room and then there are bedrooms off that. You say those are more expensive and those are where there are some empty rooms. Where do they tend to be? Particular places in England or not?
Well, it's a very nuanced market, so there's different performance across different locations. So somewhere like Brighton, where obviously it's expensive to live generally, 9 in 10 beds are priced above the maximum maintenance loan. Somewhere like Coventry, it's a very, very different story. Just 16% of beds are priced above the maintenance loan. So yeah, massively differing performance by location.
Emily O'Hara, why did you opt for this purpose-built student accommodation?
Hiya.
Hi.
So for me personally, I only live in Liverpool, so it's not too far away from me, but I felt like I needed to kind of live in. I think there's a lot of demand to get this kind of university fresher experience, so I felt quite under pressure to kind of live in. I pay £190 a week, and I share with 5 other people. I really like my accommodation because I pay the highest, so I'm in a premium room, but I know some other people who I'm like friends with, they are paying I think £130 and their rooms are significantly smaller. They feel like it looks good when you move in, and then once you move all your stuff in, you can't really, it's not a space to live, it's just a room.
Emily, does your maintenance loan cover what you're having to pay out on your rent alone?
It does, but just about, I'm probably left with about less than £100 a term alone,
So
like
how
if
do you
I pay my
survive?
whole rent.
How are you surviving?
So I don't actually pay for my accommodation because after looking at the smaller rooms, my mum was like, you're not living in the smaller rooms, because there's just no point. Like I could have just commuted and paid less in petrol. So my nan actually pays for my accommodation, and I also work part-time as well. I think it definitely is possible, but I feel like a lot of people who are in the platinum rooms, the gold rooms, because they range from bronze to platinum, they also are in the same situation as me, where they get quite a good student loan and maintenance loan, but they have to have other people helping them out because it wasn't sufficient. I couldn't live off any of that, you know?
No. David Feeney, for decades now, there's been all this investment, hasn't there, in these purpose-built student accommodation blocks, loads of building going on. How will that be affected by these changes in demand? The fact that many people, as you were saying, are just priced out?
I certainly think if you price your product correctly, you will fill. It's pockets of under occupancy we've seen across the country, not an overall trend. And I think from the developer side, it's very difficult for them to develop in the current environment. So it costs £120,000 to build a single purpose-built bed, and that effectively means you need to be charging upwards of £250 a week to make the thing break even. So it means there's only a few viable markets at the moment, so it's very, very difficult. And I think, like has already been said, purpose-built is a good product. It's good quality. It's managed, all-inclusive bills. You get social and amenity spaces, which I think is very important in an era of increased student mental health issues. So yeah, it's difficult for developers too.
David Feeney from Cushman and Wakefield and Emily O'Hara, new student. Thanks both. Almost all of the money that is being lost through authorised push payment fraud, where people are tricked into sending money to a criminal by bank transfer, like we heard on that first story about Booking.com, nearly all of that money is now being refunded to victims by their banks. It's happening under new rules that were introduced a year ago by the regulator. We're going to hear from the regulator in a minute, but first, here's a quick reminder of what happens in this kind of fraud, authorised push payment fraud. Here are some of the people we've interviewed over the years who've been persuaded by fraudsters to send those people money through electronic bank transfer.
And he said, can you settle the bill or can you send me some money? So I did it. The bank account let me do it and it all seemed fine. There was no fraud check on it.
So they made me feel like it's totally normal. They're guiding me through, keeping me talking on the phone. And then I was like, okay, well, there's something is really dodgy here. I opened the app on my phone and I see that having had 56,000 something and now £400, my heart nearly stopped.
We need to keep your bank safe. You give me a password, like my grandson's savings that I cut away for him every week. I had to withdraw all of them out one by one, and it came to £12,440 something pound. This is going safe to this account. It'll be safe. And I was allowing an okay in every blinking thing to go through, just thinking it was safe.
Some victims of push payment fraud. David Gill is the Managing Director at the Payment Systems Regulator in the UK. That is the body that is in charge of the change in the rules. David Gill, hi and welcome. I said that almost all of the money defrauded from people through this push payment fraud has been reimbursed by the bank since these rules were introduced. It's 88% of the money. How does that compare with what used to happen?
Oh, good afternoon. Well, firstly, let me say these are absolutely devastating scams, and we've seen some real progress with banks and payment firms getting behind the policy. So we're seeing customers reimbursed by the banks more consistently, more quickly, and the banks are taking action to prevent fraud. The figures are now around 88% by value in terms of what's being returned to people. That's up from 66% around this time last year under industry voluntary schemes.
It leaves 12% of people still not getting a refund. Who's excluded then?
So what we're seeing is that around 97% of claims by volume are being paid out. There are two things that drive it not being 100%. So one would be that we allow firms to put in place a £100 excess to, so they don't necessarily have to pay the first £100. Some do voluntarily. We also put in a limit of £85,000. So that's the mandatory limit the banks have to pay out. Above that, customers can still complain and go to the Ombudsman, but £85,000 is what they're required to pay out. And a small number of very high value cases, so under 300, we think, are driving that difference.
So that shortfall in the money is to do with people paying a small excess or not having all of their money if they've lost more than £85,000, all of that returned. Now, the hope was that if the banks were made to give people this money back, they would be much more vigilant in tracking suspicious activity, in stopping the money being transferred and holding on to the money maybe and giving it back to you. Is there any evidence that that is now happening?
Well, there are two things that I think are crucial. Firstly, as you say, that incentive itself, I think, is driving action. And secondly, we required the fraudster's bank to pay out 50% of the claim. So the victim's bank will reimburse the victim, but then they can claim the rest, 50% of the rest from the fraudster's institution. So we have seen them very much taking action to prevent fraud in the first place. It's very early days on the figures, and we don't have a full year yet, but we are seeing a drop in volume, we believe, of around 16% in terms of the number of claims and around 50% over the same period in terms of value. So I do believe it's making a big difference.
You're also publishing a survey today marking a year of these new rules. And in this survey, almost half of the people you questioned who had been defrauded didn't even try to get their money back. So it sounds like you've got a job to do, doesn't it, in letting people know that this system's up and running?
Well, firstly, what I would always encourage people to do is to complain to their bank if they've been defrauded, or to contact their bank, and then their bank will help them through the process. So anyone who's been defrauded, the first step should be to go to their bank or their payment firm. We do know that some people are reluctant to do so. Sadly, they may feel embarrassed to do so, and we really encourage them not to. That's what the firms are there to help them, and they want to help.
Banks used to say to people that they would not be reimbursed where there had been gross negligence. Does that rule still apply?
So we did allow that where the customer was either complicit in a fraud or where they had been, for example, warned multiple times, chosen to ignore very specific warnings to the extent that they had been negligent themselves, the banks could refuse a claim. We've seen a very small number of that. We believe around 3% of claims have been rejected on that basis. So the vast majority, around 97% of people who have claims that are in scope, are being paid out.
There were fears when it was being brought in that the public would relax their behaviours, be less vigilant if they knew they would get their money back. Is there any evidence that that has happened?
So we haven't seen any evidence of that, but that is something that we will look at through the independent review that we've commissioned into this policy.
David Gield, the payment systems regulator. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. I've had thanks. We had loads of really interesting emails. A lot of them in praise of the private chef. We were saying private chefs have become inexpensive enough for ordinary people to afford. This one, a private chef was a godsend for us 4 years ago. One of my daughters got married in lockdown. We couldn't have more than 12 people at the wedding. We hired a manor and a private chef who cooked us a 5-course meal. It was such a great experience that my other daughter booked the same chef again for her 30th birthday. And this one, by text, we used a private chef for our wedding breakfast 18 years ago. We're amazed. The chef and waitress came to us at our tiny little cottage and prepared an out-of-this-world 3-course dinner in a tiny little antiquated oven. They even washed up for us afterwards. My husband and I enjoyed every bite. It was a surreal and lovely experience. And we've also had a lot of emails coming in about that first item, about the fraud that happens over WhatsApp, where the people you've booked your accommodation with apparently approach you and ask you to pay up front. And this one from Alan Gerard. He said, I've had 2 occasions where I've had 2 emails and a WhatsApp message about separate reservations. I lost no money, but I was concerned about my details being accessed, and I, like the 2 case studies we had, found it difficult to get any help. This one from Oliver Courtney. He says, I had the same experience only in January, with messages saying my reservation would be cancelled unless I paid right now. I got nowhere with the website, so I called the hotel directly, and the hotel told me it had over 100 people ringing with that very same problem. In the end, our reservation was absolutely fine. Thanks for those emails. It was really interesting to hear your direct experience. Tomorrow, it's our weekly consumer phone-in, and we're asking, what is your experience of having insulation installed into your home? There's a new report out tomorrow that has some shocking figures about how much poor quality insulation work has been done, often under government schemes, trying to make homes warmer and more energy efficient. Here on You and Yours, we often hear from listeners who've ended up with much colder, damper homes as a result of having these green improvements installed, and many have to pay for this insulation later on to be removed. So our question for our phone-in tomorrow is this: what is your experience of having insulation installed? Here's the email address again, youandyours@bbc.co.uk. If you get in touch and you'd like to come on the programme tomorrow, please include a phone